So I always ask myself, what is the name of this painting? Or another way to put it is write one sentence, what is this painting about? So if I'm gonna do this scene here of a rainy day scene, I would say this painting is about a rainy day in the city with cars and people with umbrellas. That's my sentence. So what that tells me is I don't go in and do all the detail of the windows and buildings. I do a suggestion, but no detail, because that's not what the painting is about. I already said, city scene, cars, people with umbrellas. That's it. And my goal is to make the person look at where my focal point is. I printed this out in black and white. I think it's a good way to see your values. A lot of times when I'm picking a city scene, I look for an area of light in the center with everything on the other sides darker. And then that way, this pulls you down into the main event. I'm going to show you a few scenes that I've done before. This is a watercolor. I hope the sheen on it isn't bad from the lighting. This is a watercolor. Again, a New York scene. Notice the light sky coming down in the middle, lighting up the sidewalk, and the people's reflections in the sidewalk. The only color really in these paintings are the signs, the headlights, the taillights, and the umbrellas. Everything else is muted. If you think about a rainy day, there's no sunlight hitting things. Here's another one. This is a watercolor also. There's no sunlight hitting things to illuminate them. Everything is going to look very muted and soft edged. This one is an oil painting. Again, this one is very monochromatic. The only color in it really is sort of the warm light in the center and on the sidewalk. But other than that, it's very muted. We're going to have a little more color than that one and this one. But because of the veils of moisture in the air, it makes everything look soft, muted in color. And the only thing, like I said, is the color will go to the headlights, taillights, umbrellas, things like that. All right, let's begin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use nice thick paint. I'm going to start off with a bristle brush. And I'm going to paint my light color first, just like I would in watercolor, mainly because I don't want this to get dirty. And for my light color, I'm just going to take Naples and white. Or I could, you could also, if you don't even, maybe at the top, I'll start more of a light blue. And I toned my canvas first with a little bit of very thin down burnt sienna and mostly mineral spirits, just so that it would have a tone. And that way, if I skip anything while I'm painting, sometimes when you paint, you'll accidentally skip. There will be some color there and just instead of bright white. Now, as I get down towards the horizon line, and I drew this in real quickly with pastel pencil. You could use a charcoal pencil. You could draw with your paint for that matter. I just drew it in to save time because I knew that I only have an hour to do this demo. So I'm going to put in, this is a little Naples and white. If you don't have Naples, you could use yellow ochre and white, mostly white. And then that will be the lightest part of the background. Now I want to mix a color that is gray, and there are lots of ways to make gray. In this case, I'm just going to use ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and white, a lot of white. I could add a little touch of alizarin crimson if I want to kind of stay on a purplish gray side. And I'm going to begin to put the buildings in, and I'm just going to block them in very lightly. They're slightly darker than the white of the sky. And each side, there's very faint buildings showing. Maybe make that one just a little bit lighter. And I want those edges to be soft. I don't want hard edges back in here because these are very distant buildings that, of course, are being affected by the moisture in the air. So it can't be real dark and it can't be hard edged. It has to be soft edge. One way you can get a soft edge is if you block it in like this and then it feels a little hard edge to you. I just take this is a soft hair brush. It's a bright, which is like a short version of a flat. And I'm just right between the light area and the dark area. I'm just running my brush back and forth, just to soften that edge just a little bit. so that everything looks misty and, you know, not in focus. This is not the point. It's sort of like in a play, the person that has a little small part, it's not the main event. So you don't want to give a lot of attention to it. But as we move out, we will begin to have more buildings that are a little bit darker. I'm going to make this just kind of light right there. In the next building, I'm going to go a little darker. Same colors, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and white with a pinpoint of alizarin crimson. That might be a little jump a little too hard, dark. So again, I can kind of lighten that. If you put something down, let's say you put something down and it looks a little too dark to you, then go back in with a little bit lighter color right on top and just make it a little softer. So what we're trying to do is create the illusion that there are buildings going back into the distance, and that what we're seeing is suggestions of buildings without really defining them. And this can go in pretty fast. I mean, there's not a lot of detail. We will do a little suggestions of windows and things like that. But remember, we talked about this painting isn't about windows or architecture. It's really about the rainy day. And so then for the last section, I'll just make it a little bit darker. And this will be the last building that we'll put in here. And I'm using a bristle brush so I can scrub with it. You don't want to scrub with your nice soft hair brushes. It'll ruin them. But for a bristle brush, I mean, that's what they're made for. And I'm kind of cutting around where I want some cars and stuff like that. We'll talk about how to paint cars in a second. So I'm very quickly getting the darker colors in here, all with the same kind of mixture. If your paint isn't spreading, I'm using it straight out of the tube, but if for some reason you feel like your paint just isn't spreading, that's when I dip in and add just a touch of liquid, which is a medium, a painting medium. You can also mix your own mediums. I used to mix my own. I used to mix 1 part stand oil, 1 part Damar varnish, and 4 or 5 parts mineral spirits. But then liquid was invented, and boy, it was so easy just to open a jar and shake it out that I switched to liquid, and I've never gone back. I like liquid for a couple reasons. 1, it helps the painting dry faster. And 2, it gives a nice sheen to the painting. It has a quality almost like a Damar varnish in it that really gives it a very nice sheen. All right, so now we've got the building shapes in there. And once we have them in there, later on, we may punch this out even more, the light area. But we want to do a little suggestion of something happening in the buildings, like, you know, maybe over here we have a little feeling of a ledge, or maybe another one here. And for the windows, again, remember I said, we're not giving any attention to them. So you never want to put in all the details of a window. What I might do is come in here and just, oops, not dark enough. Blue and brown make a black, and then you can add white to it to make it a gray. So this is a little darker version. I'm going to do a few suggestions of windows, but just by putting in a little skinny line. Put a little shadow underneath this and underneath that. And on this side, you know, I could do a few little suggestions. I don't really even see in the photograph much windows. Maybe over here I see something. I'll put a shadow here. We'll put a little light ledge here. And then I'll put a few little dark windows over here. If I want, I can put a few little windows right up here, and so on. Minimal amount of work. You certainly would not notice any windows way in the distance, so don't even bother there. If at this point you decide, well, I really want to play up that light right at the bottom. You could save that for the end, which I call dessert. A dessert are the highlights. But you know, you could also come in, this I use cad yellow and white here just to make it a little brighter. I may even put it on brighter than that towards the end, but we'll wait. Let's get everything covered. We do have, I have a little awning here, so I'll do that sort of in a light, very light blue, as if, you know, what light there is catching on that little awning. And like I said, later on, we can always lighten things up. Don't ever be afraid. I think it's better to paint a little too dark and then you can lighten up. I know that's not true in watercolor, but in oil, that's the truth. I mean, paint it a little darker than what you really want. And then that way you can always add some light on top of it. Once you get it light, it's very hard to go dark again. So I'm going to make the edge of the street, let's say right here. And we'll have a little sidewalk there, which since sidewalks are laying flat, they're going to catch a little more light from the sky than the buildings are. The buildings are upright, so you're not going to see as much light there. I'm going to let that disappear and bring this down to the cars. All right, now we're going to talk about cars and people a little bit. Sometimes people will say to me, well, how do you know where to put you know, the cars, and how do you make a car look like a car and not some goofy looking thing that by a person who doesn't know how to draw? So here's the trick I've learned over the years. Take a piece of paper out and show you. Is if you're going to draw a car, well, first look at one, okay? Don't just make it up. But always draw the windshield first. So if, let's say this is the shape of your windshield. Oops, sorry, that's the windshield. We know that there's not going to be much roof showing because our eye, you're either, depending on your height, but I'm 5'4". When I get in my car, the roof is just a little bit above my eye line. I probably don't even see the roof, but if you're tall, you might see a little bit, but you're not going to see a lot. And then you put the little sides on it. The rest of the car, this is like a small box. And this is the front of the car, which is a little bit bigger. So this is about 1/3. This is about 2/3. Your headlights are going to be somewhere like in here. You're going to have tires showing. We might have a little bit at the side of the car here. We'll just put a little bit of, oops, kind of hard to draw reaching over my painting. Probably should have taken that down. Here's, let's say, the back of the car. And another tire here showing. The trick to doing the car, though, is to have shadow under here. Make sure you put a shadow under the car and under the tires. And the place that you're going to let light show through is right here or anywhere you can see between the tires, because that will make it look like a car. So keep that in mind. Always draw the windshield first and then add the roof. And then that's 1/3 of the car, and then 2/3 of the car is the back part or the front part, depending on what angle you have. So let's begin with some fun part of the car. Just like in painting and drawing, I would do the same thing with the car. I would start with the windshield, get the windshield in properly. In this case, it's the back windshield. And again, we want the back windshield not to have too much detail. I'm going to make it pretty dark to begin with. I'm going to put it in there. And again, sort of, the sides usually are slightly angled. The top of the car is going to be catching light. You could make your cars, depends what color you want your car to be, but for right now, I'm just going to add a little very light blue, and that's not light enough. Go really light. And the sides are not going to be as light. The back, this is the back of a car. So, and in the photograph, it looks quite dark. So I'm going to kind of go ahead and make it maybe not quite as dark as the windshield, but we'll make a yellow car, a taxi, in a minute. And then I'm going to add, well, let's just make this kind of more squared off. This car is going to be in front of that one, so. if you want to clean up something, if you went too far, dip in your mineral spirits and erase. Just get a clean, you know, take your brush that's cleaned and just let the mineral spirits erase what you want to get out of there. And then I'm going to bring that windshield down just a little bit more. If you're doing the hood of the car, or if the back of the car has a little bit of a, you know, like a sedan, it might catch a little more light on the top of it, like right there, and then be darker as it goes down on the back side of it. The minute we take cad red light and put some tail lights in here, it starts reading car. The other thing I do sometimes, I'll take, I'm going to just take a little cerulean blue and run over that just a little bit. And if you want a shape of a person in there, you can even do a little black dot for the head and a suggestion of shoulders. For the bumper, in this case, the bumpers look quite dark, although they are catching a little light right on the top of it. So I'm going to put a bumper in here. And I'm going to take a very light color and put a little highlight on top of the bumper to make it show up. And then for our tires, we'll just use blue and brown, ultramarine blue and burnt umber, or burnt sienna, either one, and put the little tires in there. And of course, the main thing we have to do is, as we put the road in here, we also have to have a shadow, which we'll do in a little bit. Let's do this yellow car next to it. And this time I'm going to use, we can use between cad yellow and yellow ochre, using those colors. This car, let's say, is in front of that one. So if it's in front, it's got to be lower. I didn't draw it properly, so let's kind of, let's see. Low. I'm going to put this a little lower. It's too dark. One thing about cad yellow, and this is cad yellow light, it's semi-transparent. So you really sort of have to add, oops, forgot to draw my windshield. I didn't take my own advice. Let's do the windshield first. Here's the windshield coming out this way. Now I'm going to cut on top of that car that I just did with cad yellow and white, and where it gets a little darker, add a little yellow ochre. The back of the car, I'm going to block in here first, and I am hitting that other car, so I'm trying to keep that car a little cleaner. It's going to be just a little bit lower because it is in front. I'm going to take a little darker color, suggest the bumper. Let's get the tires in there. Now let's put a little highlight on top of that trunk of that taxi or whatever it is, car. Put a little lighter yellow there. And the other thing you could add too, which I didn't do to the other car, but we could do this, is put a little license plate. Suggestion. Don't go in there and write numbers. This is all just suggesting what's happening in these cars. And let's put the cad red light tail lights in again. And we might have a couple more cars over here. These are either parked or they're on the side of the road. You can make up your mind what they are. I would still, even though if they're parked, I'd still give them a bright red tail light because that's kind of what makes things look really nice. So again, I'm going to start with drawing the windshield, and I've got two cars right next to each other. So let's kind of take, I'm going to take burnt sienna, burnt umber, and put in sort of a darker windshield. We'll do both of these cars at the same time. This looks like a paneled truck, so I probably won't put a windshield on that one. And I'm going to take a light color to put a light, like light hitting the roof, light hitting on the side, and then the top of the sedan is catching a little light right here. The other part of the van, and you can make this car whatever color you want. I'm just going to kind of make it a grayish color. I don't really want anything real bright colored over on the edge of the painting. Like, it's okay for the tail lights, but don't go in there and put a bright red car at the edge of your painting. because what you're going to do is just pull people's eyes over there, and that's not where we want people looking. You're constantly making a plan on how to make people look at what you want them to look at. Put a little bit of tail lights there. Let's give this bumper a little lighter color. We could also put in a little shadow under the bumper. Let's do that on this one too. And we'll give it a little license plate and some tires. The cars won't look really good until you put the light under them and the reflection of the road. The road is where we're going to have a lot of fun. Let's do one last little car here. We'll put the top of this one in. I'd like that to be pretty light, actually. This is like a white panel truck, so we'll put it in very light. Oops. It's not going to have a windshield, so I'm just going to make a light that's just a little bit darker than that for the panel of the truck. And we'll come down here to the bottom of the truck. This is where you're really going to have to do a license plate, because otherwise it'll just look like a big box with nothing. We'll have a little shadow under the truck, and we'll do our tires. Maybe only one shows. We could even do a suggestion of, sometimes these panel trucks, they have a little, like a roof, like a little shelf or something to suggest that that's a truck. We also have a person with an umbrella. Now in this case, in this photograph, he's walking out of the painting. So I didn't like that. So I decided to flip it. I got on my computer and I flipped it so that he's facing the other way. Now, if you have Photoshop, you could do this very easily. I don't have Photoshop. I don't know how to use it. So as I flip it, now he's walking out this way, but I'm going to put him over here. One thing about umbrellas is you don't want them too tall, and I think I drew that a little too tall. You can decide what color umbrella you want to put in there. I think in the photograph it was yellow, but I think I'm going to make it red. And I want to keep it a little more, don't get too round. Draw it angularly first, put in your umbrella, and it's not really very deep. You know, if you look at it this way, umbrellas really aren't that bad. I've seen people that make them look like a big U shape upside down, and it doesn't look right. I'm going to take some cad orange and right on the edge hit it with cad orange. This will suggest the light hitting here. Take my cad red and mix with a little orange right in here. And then on the other side, take a little bit of alizarin, mix it into the cad red and make a little darker red. Now the umbrella has some form. Usually people are going to be silhouetted on a rainy day. We don't really see, unless they had a red coat on or something, you're not going to really notice much about them. Their head is going to be under the umbrella, so you're only going to see a little pinpoint of the head. You're going to have the body in here. And you know, I always say when you do people, look at a photograph and just try to capture the shape of them. I see a lot of times what I'll do is I'll draw a rectangle first for the body, and then I can punch it out in the front or bring it in. I could make this a woman by just adding a skirt. You know, instead of having legs, I could have a skirt on like that. And then we do have to have some legs showing. The leg might have gotten a little fat there that we'll clean up when we put in the background. And maybe that we got to have the person holding the umbrella, right? Because there's going to be a little line coming down like that of the umbrella. So you got to have some kind of hand or something. Oops, I think I got that too low. All right, so when you get something low, dip in your mineral spirits and erase. And I'll just bring her arm up just a little bit. Okay. Now let's start playing with the background of the street. And then afterwards, we're going to go in and do what I call the dessert, the fun part of decorating it. As we put in the street, though, we are also drawing, because we're redrawing anything that we didn't draw correctly. So be very conscious of how you put paint down. I'm going to come in and I'm going to use a flat brush or a bright A bright is just a cut off version of a flat. And I like brights because I have a lot more control than I do with a flat. Flat is a little floppier. So this gives me a little control. Remember, we want a little light under each of these cars. In this case, where we're near here, I'd probably put the light in with Naples and white, or a very, yellow and white, some kind of cad yellow and white, something that's very light. And then after that, we can go in with our shadow color. And for the shadow color, again, I might make it a little more purple, add a little more alizarin to my ultramarine blue, burnt umber and white, or burnt sienna and white. I think I used burnt sienna. And I'm going to put some shadow in here. Now, after that, we can go, the streets can be a little lighter. The streets are flat, so the light will hit it. So you'll see more light. I'm going to switch back to the other photo now. You are going to see a lot more light in here. And I actually might switch to my bristle brush because I can scrub it in faster. Bristles are nice that way, that you can really cover a lot of area by just putting it in and scrubbing it in. You also could add a little liquid if you want. And what I want to do is kind of keep the lighter areas in the center of the painting. We later on can tone this down. And also, I would say near the person, except in order to put light near the person, I would switch back to my flat brush so that I can cut in around him or her. Oops, I think I just put her on a diet and she lost about 10 pounds. And do your stroke marks horizontally. You want the street to lay flat, so brush flat. And then I'm going to come in with more of a lavender color and kind of fill in. I'm just going to kind of get the street covered. If some of that warm underglow shows through, that's fine, because it'll kind of give it a nice feeling. But put your paint on thick. I don't like to see paint where it's very thin. In order for that shadow, under that car, I got to be lighter, so I may have to put that shadow. I think I just took that out of there too. And I'm going to kind of first paint. I call this paint by numbers, where I'm just blocking in. I'm not worried about blending it. I'm just trying to get things covered. Maybe on this side, I'd go a little darker. I might add a little more ultramarine blue and burnt sienna just to get it a little darker over here in the corner. I really don't want people going off looking over here. So I'm not trying to attract any attention to that area. I'm keeping this all kind of dark. We can have some fun by adding other colors here in a minute, but let's just get it all covered first. And again, I'll switch brushes as I get close to the umbrella and try to cut in around that a little bit. Oh boy, my person's really been on a diet now. She had COVID for 3 months and she lost 50 pounds. Okay, and then in here between these cars, I mean, you could even put another car in here if you want. I wouldn't go too light in here. We got a white truck that will punch out brighter in a minute, but I'd probably get something that sets off both cars. So I want a little darker. I might come in here and just put a little lighter color on that side of that car, just a little bit. And maybe with this truck, really come in here and pull some more lights out right here, just to give it, a little punch. Oh, I didn't put any red tail lights on that car, on that truck. Put one there. Now we got one more little space to cover before we can have some fun. So now what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to just kind of cut in around this person a little bit. We'll have to reshape this person because this person really took a beating with my crazy brush. And this is where you might pick up that piece of paper where you wrote down with one sentence, what is this painting about? And make sure you're on track. Make sure that you are doing what you said you were going to do. That you are going to, it's about buildings. It's about people in the city and cars. It's not about windows or things like that. If you've emphasized windows too much, so I'm going to do a suggestion of something happening in there under this awning. I'll put a little shadow. I might come in here and just do a little suggestions of something happening. Don't know what. Maybe a little shadow on this side. This thing is maybe sticking out a little farther. bring that down to the sidewalk, bring this down to the sidewalk. Somehow my sidewalk kind of disappeared, so let's put a little dark line. And I'm painting wet into wet, and so what happens, which is nice, is that it makes everything sort of very soft looking. It's not real definite, it kind of blends in. There's a little highlight on the curb. Now let's introduce some colors, and also let's introduce some of these fun things that are the street lights. You could also, if you decide that you don't want to work wet to wet, you could let this dry, and then you could come back in later. You could even draw with pastel pencil or charcoal and draw where you want them. And that way you could, you know, not have to worry about if you screw up. However, we don't have a lot of detail in here. If we screw up, we just fix it. So I'm going to put one little street light here, and I'm going to have to make it lower. This is the one that's, oops, not showing up. All right, I need a lot of paint on my brush, no liquid. If we put liquid in there, it'll blend in. So nice thick paint. And we're going to have another one maybe right up here. I'm just trying to see if this is, just so that I can see what I'm doing. This is the street light. I could even take a little shadow color and right underneath that, go over that. And let's do another one up here. This one I'm going to put here. And we'll make this come over like this. This should look like a box. It should look like a box. And then within that box, you can have some fun with color. So let's say I want to make it look like it's a green light. I could take cerulean blue and yellow ochre and make up sort of a nice bright green, maybe even a little cad yellow in there, and put a little green spot. Now that's too dark, you don't even see it. So now I'm going to add white to that. Still too dark. So that's the type of thing you have to, oh boy, that's the type of thing you have to play with to get it the right color. I might now take, maybe I'll take some, I got some turquoise and mix a little yellow in it. See if that'll look a little brighter. That's better. That's the kind of thing you can work on again later with, when it's dry, you can come back in and play with it that way. All right, so let's get some more happening in here. Right now, it's a little bit boring. And so what I like to do sometimes is I like to come in and add color in the painting in a lot of different ways. Since I mentioned turquoise, I'm going to just take a little turquoise, I'm going to put those in a little brighter. I could drag some turquoise down in here, some of that green stuff, turquoisey green. I could also drag some of this red of the taillights down in here and drag them in. Another thing a lot of times I'll do is I'll drag down first and then I pull it over horizontally. Now they're probably going to have to be hit again because as you do this, they blend in with the color that's down there and it sort of messes it up. I want to go a little darker with my shadow. I'm going to put a little more shadow under this car, a little more under this car, maybe kind of soften it, a little under that one, a little more under this one. And I don't want it just to look like a harsh stopping and starting, so I'm going to kind of soften that. Under the person, we could have a little suggestion of reflection in the street. The street is wet. Oh. Cover that up. But there's nothing wrong with beginning to flick colors in here so it becomes more interesting. What do I mean by that? Okay, I could take some ultramarine blue, maybe some cerulean blue, mix it kind of in the gray, but not completely. And what I'm going to do is, like right around this umbrella, put a few little darker colors, dragging it up into the building. Maybe over here, take some lighter colors and do some more suggestions. Maybe these windows have a little light in them. We'll just make them a little lighter. Maybe what we'll do is put a little red sign over here. Maybe this is a marquee or something, you know, we'll have a little red sign right here. And if you want to have, just make it a little better. If you want to have a little fake printing in there, we don't want to be able to read it, but you can come in with a little bit of like yellow ochre, a little bit of white, and just kind of fake scribble, I call it. It suggests that there's something happening there without us really knowing what it is. Put a little darkness around this, as if this is inside. Maybe there's a place where people go in and buy their tickets. A little darker right there. What we're trying to do now is to make this area stand out. So you can do it in a number of ways. You can do it by putting darker things around it, or you can also do it by putting lighter things on top of the cars. So for example, with this car here, I might come in with almost white with barely any yellow in it at all and see if I can get it light. If you put it down and it's not looking any different, what I suggest is let it dry, and then when you come back, it's very easy to hit these lights. Because what you're doing right now is as you put these in, you're mixing in with whatever's down. And so you may have a hard time getting that as light as you want it. But try. I always try, and then if I can't, I'd come back later and do it. Like even, I would say, I would like that roof more lit. And this roof more lit. And this roof more lit. But you can't just leave it like this. I mean, between these two cars, we just have all this darkness. I would probably come in here and take some of my yellow and maybe do a little bit of yellow in here. And flick it up. And maybe over here, above this, let's have a little more happening up here. This looks boring, nothing happening. So we have this little red marquee. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to take cad orange and put a little cad orange on the top of that sign. Now let's put another little sign with no detail. We'll put another little sign here. And we're going to just kind of drag that down a little bit so that we got something in there, but we don't really know what it is. I also like to sometimes flick in other colors that just look pretty and have nothing to do with the painting. And what I mean by that is I might take some of that like cerulean blue and that turquoise I was talking about, and in a couple places just kind of put some color, even if it's not there, like maybe in this building, add a little, that's a little cerulean and a little turquoise. It's not real noticeable, but it gives a little interest there that wasn't there before. In here, there's not much happening. So maybe I'll come in and take a little bit of maybe cad orange and just kind of tone it down so it's not bright. Or you could take burnt sienna, something, and just kind of flick a little soft colors in here that just change it slightly. All you're doing is adding color that says nothing. You're not changing the we could also add little people in here too if we wanted to. I would definitely play up the red in the street. Unfortunately, it's very hard to make it stick when it's so wet. Let's see if we can. And again, stroke down. If you think it's too much, then what I would do is, remember that there's water on the street and it affects it. We could come in here and put a few breaks in here just to show that this is wet. It's wet pavement. Just by kind of making a few little horizontal stroke marks, you can get a nice look to it. I think the shadow under the cars isn't dark enough. That light under the tires won't show up unless it's dark. So I'm going to kind of get a little darker again. And this is the refinement area. This is where you're starting to put stuff down and refine what you have. Like, for example, I might even take some turquoise and white and maybe right around this person, add some lighter colors, but instead of the yellowy color, make it more of a turquoisey color. Only because it's a little brighter, a little more intense color. It could add some interest just of looking at that person a little bit more without really noticing why you're looking at that person. Of course, every time I do something like that, then I lose their shadows. And I've sort of lost the shape of this person. So let's go back into this person just a little bit. How am I doing time-wise? Well, good. All right, so this person looks a little bedraggled. Looks like the rain really washed him out. I'm going to, and this is where I will use like a yardstick or something to keep my hand out of my painting. I rest my hand on this and I will begin to block this person in again. Let's have a little stick coming down for the umbrella. And you can always put the person in, and later on, if you look at this person after it's dried and you don't like it, you can always turn her back into a man. I mean, you know, you don't have to keep her a woman just because I put a skirt on her. You're not stuck with it for life. Very easy operation. So she got a long coat on now. And again, drag some of your colors down here. I might even, you know, I've got enough room, I could even drag a little red umbrella down there as if that's reflecting down here too, you know. What other things would I do? You could go back into the windshield of the car, and you know, this time you're going to have to use a smaller brush to get in there, and do stuff where you have a real dark line right at the top of the windshield. And then maybe inside the car, we do a suggestion of somebody's head in there. I'm going to cut this one. This one got too big too. And you can come in there and you can do the suggestion of the head by painting negatively. In other words, I'm going to use a little of that turquoise and put in between the two people sitting in this car. Maybe the same with this one. Put a little suggestion of a lighter color. Or if you don't have any person in there, take your dark color, put a little pinpoint for the head and some shoulders. And just, you know, leave it at that. This is a type of painting, though, you definitely are going to have to come back when it's dry and hit your highlights again, because they do kind of sink in and they're hard to keep them really light. Got a little orange right there I don't like. I might do a little more in this building, not much, but just a suggestion. I could come in here and maybe give this a little more shadow right in here. And maybe in this one, put a little lighter color of some sort. Let's try this and see. Just to break up a big area. We don't want a lot of things happening here, but you can kind of have fun with what's happening in here. If you want to do a little suggestion of windows in places, that's fine, but make sure that you don't go into too much detail. Like I said, better to keep it too light than too dark. And in here, you know, same thing. If you have a few little windows, that might even be too dark for back in there. I don't like that. I'm taking that out. Right now, it's sort of still kind of bare bones. I think we need some more stuff happening in here. I might even want to put a car over here parked on the side. If I wanted to do that, I would either, one, have to wipe out where I want it because this paint is pretty thick, or I could let it dry and then come in with a piece of charcoal and draw where I think the shape would go. Or maybe I want some little cars back here. We could also do some suggestions of cars, you know, beyond this person way back there. And you can add stuff. It's much easier to add stuff than to put it in when it's wet. Any questions? Anybody has questions, unmute yourself. A lot of times I'll look at things and say, okay, how can I pop this painting? And we got a nice dark here. Maybe this dark car should be a little darker. Maybe that one should be a little darker. Remember, things that are light, if they're next to something that's dark, they look better. So I might darken that car just a bit. Let's darken this and just see what happens. I'll keep I'm going to get rid of the red lights just for a minute as I darken this car. Keep the top of the roof light, but let the sides be a little darker. Now we'll put our little tail lights back in there. And let's put the highlight on the top of the car back in there. Ah, made it too fat. That's not my phone. Gotta fix this umbrella. Oops. Any questions so far? Obviously, this painting needs a lot more work. One of the things I might do too after it dries is come in here and really sort of darken a few things to punch it out a little bit more. I wanted to keep it misty, and it's always better to be too light than too dark. But at some point, you have to go back in and say, okay, I need some more darks in here. I need these cars to punch out a little bit more. I might blur, right now that's kind of a hard edged, and you don't really want a hard edge in areas where it's not important. So I would probably soften that a little bit. The other thing I like to do is I do like to, anytime I have something that I really want to attract attention to, wherever, if it's light, I put a dark next to it. I might go really dark right on top of that highlight of that car. And then just pull it up. This one, we've got the light there, so can't really do it to that one. But I could do it to the side of the car over there. I could come in here, just, even though it may not be that way in the photo, or it may be in that way. Right now, all I'm doing is looking at lights and darks and trying to punch out my lights by putting dark near it. This car looks a little
Jane?
Yeah.
Smart. You basically then are using color to draw people into the painting, the background of the painting. That marquee, for example, is one technique for doing that. Nothing on the right side. I don't know. I guess, and it's essentially red. Is that deliberate, or does that work best with the gray, or what? Why is it that way?
You know, I'm looking at the photo and using it sort of. I am gonna, if we wanted to punch this side out again, I could put some lights in the window up here.
I would do that. Yeah, I think.
You know, just for variety. Sometimes you just, where you think you need color, you can add it. I could also put a few more people in here, just suggesting people standing on the side of the road without attracting a lot of attention. Here's what I mean by that. We could have two people over here that are sort of standing back a little bit, so their umbrellas aren't going to be as big. Let's make two of them. And we'll put the person in there too. But notice that the umbrellas are about at the same height, because if you think about it, when you see somebody, you're seeing them at the eye level that you have, or however tall you are. And so the heads are always going to be in the same thing, just like the roofs are always going to be sort of in the same area. But the
well, I think that helps. I think it draws your eye away from that one person, male, female, with the umbrella, and into the painting.
Right. You might even put a few people back here, and these are really.
Right. That's just what I'm thinking.
Right.
What I would like to do.
Yeah, and a lot of times what I'll do when I'm doing one of these, you know, I use the photograph, but I'm not married to it. So in other words, if you want a little suggestion of people here and there, go ahead and put them in. I mean, you don't have to follow, the photograph doesn't have to always give you exactly what you want. And so you can add things. A lot of times too, what I'll do is, like I said to somebody earlier, I'll take this into the bathroom and I hold it up in the mirror and I look at it backwards. And when I do that, I can really see exactly if it's totally lopsided, like if I got everything on one side and nothing happening on the other side. The minute I hold it up in the mirror, I can see it. We could also do things like I could take that same turquoise color and maybe just right here in these windows, put a little brighter color in there. I also sometimes right at the tops of the windows will put a little shadow right at the top. These are just little things. I mean,
Jane,
mhm.
on the left-hand side of your painting, there's a little bit of a dark shadow on the photograph. There's a little bit of a dark shadow that brings the dark from the right across. There's some light in the middle, and then there, you had your brush on it.
Yeah, you know, and also after you step back from this, I could say these shadows aren't dark enough. You know, you don't know. One of the problems with doing a demo is you can't step back from your work. You know?
Right.
You're jammed in here. But as soon as I step back, I can see lots of things that, you know, I would get this darker. I would get these wheels darker. I could, like you said, over on this side, because we got this light truck here, let's get this darker. And just what I do is I put it down and I just brush it up and let it kind of dissipate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, that's starting to come out now.
Yeah.
The other thing I find too is once this dries, the highlights aren't as light as I think they are. Or either that or they kind of dry differently. So then I have to come back in and hit everything again. So for example, with this awning, I could come in here and hit this with a little more light. That orange, when it dries, might not look light enough. I might have to come back in here again and hit it with a little cad orange, maybe with a little cad yellow. All of these things require adjustment. So I would say, even though I blocked in a lot today, I would let this dry. I would probably come back in here and do something up in here. This is a little bland, not that it's bad, but you could do a little more suggestion of things. Don't go crazy with windows. The more windows you put in does not make the painting better. So be careful about that. I'm going to soften that a little bit. That's too. And here's the other thing. Once you finish the whole painting, then you could come in here and really go, let me just kind of see if I can do it. It is a little hard wet into wet because paint just mixes with what you have down. But I could come in here, this is cad yellow, pale, and white. And I could come in here and put in this light much brighter. Just hit the roof of that car. But I mean, you could go back and play with this. I could take that same thing, especially after it dries, and maybe come in and get this thing really light here. I can't seem to get it any lighter than what I have right now. But, and I don't have to do it with yellow. I could even do it with, you know, some turquoise or whatever.
Well, you know, Andy Evenson uses it, instead of focal point, he uses the term points of interest.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In a painting, you tend to have more than one focal point. You could have several places where you want the viewer to be looking and making it interesting.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think that's what you're beginning to do.
Right. I think the other thing is you also want to entertain the eye. And what I mean by that is, yeah, this isn't important, but if you just leave it just the plain old, you know, light gray, medium gray, dark gray, it could be a little boring. And so you could come in here and just have a little suggestion of other colors. Just like I said, taking a little cerulean, maybe put a little, let me see if I can get something that looks light enough. You know, don't overdo the window business, but you could put a little bit of lights in there, just a little bit. Just for suggestion purposes. Be careful that you don't go overboard, because this is not where we want people to look, but it's got to still be interesting. Now, I also could put in, there's some more stop lights here that I could put in. I sort of lost my green in there. I don't know what happened. I think I'll put it in later. But I could probably put another one in here. I think that would actually be very interesting to have another one. And this one is the highest one of all. Let's say about right here. I usually draw the stoplight first so I know what I'm aiming for. And then come in here and put your line in. You could, there's American flag in here somewhere. I don't know where it is now. Where's the color one?
On the left.
Oh yeah, over here. You could even put that in, you know, you could come in and put an American flag in, or, you know, you could do whatever you want. We could even do a little, there looks to be, let me take this black and white away now. We could come in here. There are some more stoplights back here actually, which I think would be very pretty if I had a bunch of them, you know, back in here, just sort of subtly. And again, it's probably easier to put them in when it's dry than when it's wet. But what I'll do is when I finish this, I'll send it to Ray and he can put it in the McLean Art Society newsletter next week or next time, just so that people can see how I finished it off.
Jane, what about the possibility of lights in the windows?
In the windows here?
Uh-huh. Do you ever do that?
Could, but now you're changing your story.
Right.
You know, which is fine. I mean, if you want to change your story, you can. I was trying to make this about a rainy day and not about the glow of the city.
Oh, right.
So, that's why I say write down what you think this painting is going to be about, so that it keeps you on track and it doesn't make you jump all over everywhere. Because it's easy to all of a sudden, oh yeah, let's add this, add this. Next thing you know, we're not looking at the people in the street. We're up here looking, oh, look at that little glow, and there's a little person in the window, and oh, that's so cool. You could also add little banners and signs and things. All of those things can add to the painting. I'll show you, if you're going to put a flag in there, let's say we're going to have an American flag hanging somewhere right here. Put it in sort of as a very light gray. Don't make it, even though it's red, white, and blue, don't make it white. And then take your little small brush, add that little corner of blue. That might be too dark, but we'll see. And then take a little tiny round pointy brush and put in a few little red stripes. Again, go on the side of being a little bit darker red, like alizarin, with a little cad red. Don't use cad red right straight out of the tube at first. And because we want it muted, and don't make them perfectly straight. This flag is waving, so we're gonna kind of curl it. Hold on. Also easier to do when it's dry. You could do something like that, and then of course you'd have to have some kind of line that connects it to what it's, you know, hanging from. But that's the kind of thing that, you know, is detail that you put in, but don't overplay it. If you're going to put it in, it's got to be subtle. Trying to think what else. If we wanted this panel truck to really look like a panel truck, I could do a little fake scribble writing on it too, you know, like I suggest. I would also, after this dries, I'd come back and hit these reds with, in the center of the reds, come back and hit it with a little yellow and white or orange and white, because what happens is you want that sort of to have a glow. It's kind of hard to do when it's wet. I mean, it's just going to blend in, but if you put a little more glow to it after it dries, it has a nice feel to it. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I mean, obviously it needs a lot more, but this is a great block in where now I can go back in and play with it when it's dry and decide, what do I need? What do I want to attract attention to? Right now, to me, this looks like a midget car next to a big van. So I got to either make this car really feel like it's in front of it, or I got to change that somehow. It's not reading quite right. But these are sometimes things that you don't realize until after you step back from it.
It's nice and rainy.
Yes, thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. You know, another thing you could do is notice there's a tree up here that sort of is very non-noticeable. And that is a good way to put a dark in here And don't make it green. Make it sort of maybe a very dark blue brown, so that if you put yellow green in here, you ruin the painting. You got to keep it all in the same color harmony. You got to kind of keep it muted, because the only things, remember, that have color are the bright lights and the umbrella. Everything else is a second fiddle. And so if you put a yellow green in there, you've ruined the painting. But you could put that in, and you could put it in wet and wet, or you could wait till it's dry and put it in. And that could also be nice. It'll give you a feeling of, well, I'll just do it real quick. It could give you a feeling of, something happening, but not something that you really notice a lot. Whenever I do trees, I always start with the outer edges, and I just tap in sort of the edge of the tree that I'm trying to suggest. Put a little more blue in it. I have some browns showing too. And then in here, I can go in and cut in a little, more filled in, because we're not seeing. And maybe bring a couple branches down towards what I want people to look at. I think that actually looks good. I like that. I don't want it to be perfectly straight, so I might have to pull a few out into here, and maybe up here pull one or two out, just so that it's not, I don't like that hedge clip look, which for some reason our brain loves it. Our brain loves everything hedge clip and even and perfect. And
That's a real improvement. It's very nice.
Yeah.
What colors did you use for that?
That was ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, but because it's wet underneath, it mixed in with whatever I had down there.
No,
Looks
very nice.
fabulous.
Very
See, now I think that improved the painting a lot.
It did a lot. It really did.
And
It's at a warmth, certain nice.
you
Nice.
could
Balance
even,
it
if you
out.
wanted a few, let me use a flat, because I can do a lot better with it. If I wanted to do suggestion of branches, I could come in here and do a few branches.
That's great.
And that would be it with that tree. I probably wouldn't do anything else.
Very nice.
I think that it improved it 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, any other questions? I'll turn it back to Ray.
Well, thank you. So I have a question for you. Will you continue to work on that painting? Is that?
Yeah, I would probably let it dry. I probably won't work on it today. I probably let it dry, because it's pretty soaking wet. And once it's dry, it's so easy to come in and clean up and add highlights. And like, I can tell that this drooped a little bit too much. To do things like that, I gotta solve Papa Bear and Baby Bear. That's bugging me. I might have to move this car down a little bit more, or pull it over in front of this one a little bit. I think that's probably what I need to do. It started mixing with that color, and that yellow got kind of mustardy looking, but I may change that just a little. But yeah, I would probably work on this a little bit more. And the other thing you can do is when you have, after you get all some of these lights in here and stuff, see, it's so wet, it's not gonna stay. It's not looking bright red. So, but that green is gone now. Once you have those in there, then you can even flick little reds, like look at all these little red spots here and there, and who knows what they are. I mean, you could kind of come in, and I would call that the finishing dessert, where you just put little spots of color here and there, and we don't really know what they are. They might be reflection or something, but just add a little color here and there without really doing a whole lot.
So as a non-oil painter, how long will it take that to dry before you start doing that?
So if I really wanted it to dry, I have a little lamp that bends over, and I can put it under the lamp, and it'll be dry, by tomorrow morning. Or, and I hesitate to tell anybody to do this because I've had students burn their paintings up. I turn the oven on to 200. When it gets to 200, I turn the oven off, and I stick the painting in there, and I put a sign on the oven, do not use oven. Because one of my students put her painting in there, and her husband came down in the morning to make breakfast, and he turned the oven up to 450 and
Ah,
turned that thing up. So
Right.
if you don't put it in the oven, it would be dry in 2 days. You know, you could work on it. So if I know I'm not going to work on it until next week, hey, I just let it sit.
Well, great. Anybody have any questions? Any other questions? Quick questions?
no,
Well, Jane, thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you so
And,
much.
Thanks, Jane, it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Enjoy
it's
it.
great to see everybody, and hopefully, maybe we'll do a little Zoom tutorial over the course of the next month, and we'll kind of get a couple of our little